Yeah, welcome everyone to today's webinar. This is Andrew McDonald from the PAC Global team. We'll wait just about 1 minute for everyone to join and get settled. All right, well, hello everyone. This is Andrew McDonald from PAC Global. Thank you for making time to join us today as we focus on what has become an increasingly important topic for the packaging community. So we're going to lead into the main event with some brief introductions, starting with PAC Global, or PAC for short. Slide, please. Yeah, for those new to PAC, PAC is a long-standing nonprofit industry association with members across the packaging value chain and increasingly from around the world. Education and training are central to the work we do at PAC, and we offer a variety of activities for the packaging community to connect and to learn. And PAC Next is one of the main ways we do this. Slide, please. And here's yours truly. I quarterback our PAC Next team. This is a team that offers a wealth of experience, resources, and practical advice related to taking action and making decisions with respect to packaging, sustainability, and circularity, from design right through to end-of-life considerations. So along with moderating PAC Next webinars, I co-teach with colleague Dan Lance our packaging circularity course, as well as our golden design rules for plastic packaging training. I also lead our reusable packaging efforts. There I follow the space closely, involved with Canada Plastics Pact and National Zero Waste Council efforts in this area, and have a growing global network of relevant contacts and resources. Slide, please. Our PAC Next activities also include some consulting services, and I'm happy to say our team has grown. And together, the 5 of us, from left to right, Alan Blake, Dan Lance, Cheryl Sullivan, yours truly, and Claire Sand, we cover a lot of ground to help achieve the mission you see before you, which is really about taking action and making packaging sustainability decisions more confidently and efficiently. Slide, please. Finally, here's a snapshot of some of our upcoming events and activities just in the next month or so. Lots more lined up for 2024, so please visit pac.global for more details. Slide, please, Lindsay. Thank you. So as far as our format for today's focus on addressing chemicals of concern, we're going to have 3 presentations from Martin Gooch, Claire Sand, and Weldon Williams, followed by Carl Botha, who will briefly reflect on the 3 main presentations and highlight some key points related to how, in Carl's case, Tim Hortons approaches this challenging topic. That will leave us with about 20 minutes for questions, so please don't be shy. Fill up the Q&A, and the Q&A, please, rather than the chat. Let's put our guests to work. And just a quick note on that, Martin, who's tuning into us from the UK today, has an urgent matter to attend to. So we'll leave following his presentation, but is delighted and welcomes questions following the presentation. So please, by all means, send questions on Martin's presentation, and we'll follow up afterward. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Martin Gooch. Martin is co-founder and CEO of Value Chain Management International, or VCMI, a global consulting company that helps businesses, primarily in the agri-food and seafood industries, enhance their long-term profitability and environmental sustainability. Martin holds a PhD and master's degree in agri-food management. He's received several industry awards for his work, and we are lucky to have Martin as a member of our PAC Next Leadership Council, which stewards our activities. So without further ado, Martin, over to you.
Thank you, Andrew, and I apologise in advance for having to jump off at this webinar early. So the concept of value chains, this whole webinar, of course, the title of it and the concept of it that Claire and Weldon, etc., will be talking about. The concept of value chains and their management is actually based on systems thinking, the practice of systems thinking. So what I thought is I'd set today up as an introduction and explain what do we mean by systems thinking and why is it so critical to the packaging industry, and of course anyone that utilizes packaging, whether you're a food business, a non-food business, whoever you are, whichever business you are from, you are involved in some way and shape and form packaging. So very brief background of who VCMI are: international team of practitioners, expertise in numerous sectors, automotive, aeronautical, food, as I mentioned, agriculture in many countries around the world. And our primary focus is helping clients improve their performance, their financial and operational performance by increasing their competitiveness. And we always look at whether we're looking with an individual business or multiple business that are involved in the same end product or a sector. We always look from a value chain, aka systems perspective. And we view sustainability and sustainable competitive advantage and the ability as part of that to manage risks that otherwise would not be achievable from that systems perspective. And that is determined by how businesses operate, how management decisions are arrived at, how they're executed, how they're monitored. And that is influenced in part by the system in which the business operates. And I'll describe that in a bit more in a moment, which in turn is affected to a degree in the wider enabling environment within which the system exists. And as I explained, the more fragmented the system in which your business operates, the more at risk it is to being negatively impacted by the wider environment. So the more collaborative, the more strategic you can be in your business operations in relation to your customers and suppliers and the end market you're supplying, the greater control and assurance you can have that you are isolating yourself from risks that will and may well affect your competitors. So what is systems thinking? I thought there's lots of discussion about it. There's lots of academic articles about it, and much of it for the average person is mumbo jumbo and complex. The whole concept of systems thinking is looking at and in fact quantifying the interactions that occur between all business decisions and practices associated with a final product purchased by a consumer, but also the disposal of those non-consumer parts. So in terms of packaging, what's the unintended consequences possibly of packaging and materials? As Andrew mentioned, I'm in the UK. Just today, the BBC issued a report of PFAs being found in UK drinking water and watercourses. And the people that wrote the report said that looking at PFAs individually is like a whacking a mole. The whole issue must be addressed. And they cite 9,000 different PFAs. How are you as a business going to seek to manage that scale of risk, a topic that's becoming increasingly front of center to many consumers and many people across the industry and wider stakeholders? Every business is part of a system, whether it's commercial in terms of suppliers, buyers, etc., and non-commercial, which is governments, advocacy groups, policies, regulations, etc. And as I'll briefly cover, optimizing performance requires the involved businesses to commit to establishing and maintaining collaborative shared visions and goals, explicit governance structures. If you do this, this is how we're going to react. And we make sure that doesn't occur by having strict governance and transparent structures in place and proactive communication. We want to know if something goes wrong as much as we want to know when something goes right. But what does that mean in practice? Well, I look at it as this three-legged stool. Systematically or systemically, the business involved are looking to simultaneously improve the quality of their product, improve the capacity to respond to market demands, and by improving value chain performance. And they're doing that by taking that systems-based approach. It's the monitoring and analysis of business performance in relation to the market demands, which allows businesses to achieve outcomes that are otherwise impossible, unless your competitors take a similar approach. Over the years, we've found that you can categorize systems, so value chains, into three distinct groups. There's the fragmented, there's the cooperative, there's the coordinated, and there's the collaborative. The more collaborative those businesses involved in supplying the end product and its non-consumer parts and end product to a consumer, the more collaborative they are, the greater the opportunity to mitigate internal risks and threats. So that being the possibility of a PFA or other type of undesirable chemical getting into the packaging or the product itself, as well as the ability to mitigate external risks and threats. And as we can see in today's business environment, that's becoming an increasingly important determinant of long-term success. But what is it that determines the different level of collaborativeness, enables those businesses to achieve it, and why? And you can explain it in this way. The more gaps, the more potential there is for weaknesses to incur in the integrity of information and management systems and processes and the relationships between businesses, the more the potential exists, the situation to arise that can lead to unintended consequences. And that's so you've got those potential weaknesses, those factors that you really wish would never potentially arise, but they could do because somehow something's got into the system that you ardently do not want to occur. And if particularly in a fragmented and a cooperative type system, there are those opportunities, those unintended consequences to arise. Whereas the coordinated to a degree, but certainly the more collaborative, the strategically and operationally aligned systems, they can isolate themselves better from the wider environment, and therefore there's less opportunity for unintended consequences to occur. So if you're looking at, okay, question might well be asking yourself, so how can we as a business, how can I as a business begin down the road of purposely embracing value chain, aka systems thinking approaches in how I manage my business? Begins by quantifying the type of system within which you operate. How closely does the system within which you operate reflect a cohesive unit? And there's templates to help you do that. Quantify what that means in terms of your business and the system which it operates. And then quantify the risks faced by your business and the wider system. Okay, where are we going to focus our resources to have the greatest impact for a buck, resources invested? And then determine where in the system you can determine the most dangerous risks could arise, and therefore how you could eliminate them and why, and then put in place a system-wide risk mitigation and continual improvement processes. And there's proven ways of doing that, which will enable your business to separate itself from the wider environment and manage the types of risks and implement the types of approaches that Claire and Weldon and Carl are going to discuss. So, thank you.
Martin, thank you. And thank you so much for making the time to join us today and give us some language to wrap around this and some key questions to ask. So we'll move now to our second presentation. And I want to welcome Claire Sand, Dr. Claire Sand. Claire is owner and founder of Packaging Technology and Research and an adjunct professor at Michigan State University and Cal Poly. Claire is Food Technology's packaging columnist and a monthly contributor to Packaging Digest. Claire has received a Lifetime Achievement Award and a Lifetime Achievement in Food Packaging Award, holds a doctorate in food science and nutrition, and is another member of our PAC Next Leadership Council. With that said, welcome, Claire. Over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. And I appreciate the invitation. And, you know, it's wonderful to be sort of sandwiched between two experts in the field. So I hope to do the topic I've been assigned justice. The topic I'm going to be covering is sources of chemicals of concern, and then how the industry can essentially future-proof packaging. So loved a lot of things that Martin said. One of the things he mentioned is the whole whack-a-mole. And regrettable substitutions do exist. This is where we're finding ourselves. So PFAS is just some of the chemicals of concern. What we find ourselves doing in industry is switching out from something like PFAS, like long chain PFAS, to short chain PFAS, and then whoops, we find out that short chain PFAS are an issue. So that's happening with other chemicals as well. So we'll talk through some solutions. The other thing that's happening in industry in the lower left is, and regulatory, is non-intentionally added substances, and intentionally added substances are being confused in a regulatory manner, and also within the value chain between brands, packaging suppliers, and then also with our waste recycling systems. So Weldon's going to be talking about our shape-shifting supply chain. So I'm not going to go into that at all. And I'm looking forward to his thoughts on that. So these are the key takeaways from what I'm sharing today. And yes, we are making progress. We're working really hard in industry. I always think we can work harder because I'm an optimist and pragmatic, but we really are making progress. And I think we should celebrate those successes. Where I'm going to be talking about the sources that we have of PFAS, which we'll go into in detail, and then some technology solutions. What I'm going to be highlighting in these technology solutions is not the technology solutions themselves, because we've got a whole bunch of smart people working on substitutions, but these really need value chain support. The technology is not the complete solution. And then we'll talk about how we can future-proof packaging and use the value chain pretty effectively. So these are where PFAS comes in through packaging. This is primary packaging, and you're going to be having a copy of these slides, so I'm not going to go through each one. But one of the ones we're going to be highlighting quite a bit is grease and oil resistance, specifically with paperboard. That's where we're seeing a lot of press in grease and oil resistance, especially with front of house, and I'm sure we'll get Carl's thoughts on that. Consumer-facing packaging, French fry containers, things like that. So we use PFAS as an grease and oil resistant coating, and then we also use PFAS to improve barrier properties of something like high-density polyethylene. We can almost match the barrier properties of PET. Amazing, with fluorination, and then we also see PFAS within condensation polymers like nylon and PET. One of the interesting things is I was at a labeler just last week, and they said, hey, we need to do some migration work. And I said, yeah, you do. All right, because the label can actually, and the inks on the label can migrate through into the food. So we see a lot of movement of chemicals of concerns through the label if there isn't a functional barrier into the food. One of the new areas where we're seeing a lot of chemicals of concern, and we're working on a study on perchlorate specifically, is in totes. So reusable totes or even single-use totes. There's a lot of abrasion with things like rice, oats, things like that. So they're the PFAS and also microplastics, perchlorate in this case is coming off as it's filled, as it's shipped in shock and vibration type of distribution environment. We also see PFAS entering into our systems because we use PFAS as a release agent when we mold, when we make thermoforms, for example, or even in injection molding. And then we also use PFAS when we want products, things to unnest or kind of get put down on a production line more rapidly. And we also use it with ingredients, transfer, extruders, hoppers, mixes, and things like that. So let's talk about the value chain though, because that's what we really want to hear about, and some solutions. So these are the 4 basic things that we talk about with the value chain: rewarding significance, inspiring from the top, managing knowledge, and sharing work. So I'll be going through some examples within these. One of the neat things with managing knowledge is one of the things that we can do is to remove chemicals of concern that are no longer in use. And we're working on this in a regulatory manner. The REACH changes, and also the FDA has now issued itself sort of an edict to review the presence and, hey, do we really need these things on the books still? What's good about chemicals of concern that are no longer in use off the approved chemical list is that they cannot re-enter the system. So we don't have these regrettable substances. Boy, that would be frustrating. This is some work that we've done on an industry survey. We focused on just 659 chemicals of concern that were identified as the high priority ones. And we found out, this is just for paperboard, but some were confirmed use, right? But there were about 30% that weren't in use anymore. So we can get those off the books. The other thing we can really work on is sharing work, and this really involves the value chain and the whole chain of custody. These are some technical solutions, and this is specifically related to grease and oil resistance with paperboard. So the first thing is we can just switch from paper to something else like plastic or glass or metal. The other thing we can do is alter the structure, so we can change cellulose. Change the cellulose external structure. We can use starch-based coatings. We can do all sorts of things. But a lot of these, especially increasing the density of paperboard, will result in slower production and then higher energy costs, all of which translate to sometimes as much as 40% cost increases. And we have all these different solutions for coating chemistry, but all of them don't work as well as PFAS. Right. So we have to take a step back and we say, what do we need a grease and oil resistant barrier to be for paperboard in this case? We need it to be efficient, needs to be effective at the temperature and humidity and at time of use, be consistent and reliable and things like that, and be recyclable. So this is where we need those trade-offs in industry. So is there something that we can do in the value chain? Can the front of house people change their operations? Can the back of house people assist somehow? And so we really need to work together on these different solutions. The other thing we can do, and I mentioned IAS and NIAS before, but we really need to have an origin agnostic approach. This alludes to something Martin was talking about, which is PFAS in water, in ground, and things like that. So we're not just worried about PFAS being transferred from packaging into the food. We're also worried about PFAS ending up in our water systems and things like that. So in a way, it doesn't really matter if it's intentionally added or non-intentionally added. If it's there for chemicals of concern, it needs to be managed at a level where it's not harmful for the environment and also for humans. The last one is a big one, and I'm just going to highlight sustainability initiatives in the interest of time, but we are seeing companies add chemicals of concern and managing them, especially with incentive systems, within their sustainability initiatives. Example there, a retailer saying, hey, we're going to have PFAS only allowed at this level within our retail system. So that's a value chain system solution. And then they can pull that down into the brands, which then in turn pass that demand in a way along to suppliers. Better strategy is to develop that sustainability initiative in unison, and then it makes sure that sustainability goals can be met, but also that there are solutions and we can provide value chain based incentives for those solutions rather than just an edict of certain levels of PFAS. This is, I think, the second to last slide, so I hope I'm on time. But this is a value chain based solution for front of house QSR, quick serve restaurants, French fry cartons. This is an example of how we really need to work together as an industry to address an issue like PFAS. And again, PFAS is just one of the chemicals of concern. In the lower left, we can do things like back of house processing, two-phase systems in which oil is drained and then moved into front of house packaging. So we have less oil to even deal with in front of house. We could reformulate French fries. We did this early in the early 90s with pectin methyl esterase, changing the amount of oil that was actually absorbed into the fries and was desorbed from the fries then. We also can do really super fun things with packaging design, but a lot of these packaging designs, like adsorbent substances, constructing the cartons ahead of time, and then spraying the coatings so that we don't have to worry about the crevices and stuff like that when we're refolding the cartons and erecting them. Those require value chain based inputs and things. So it is a whole system working together. So this is what I talked about. Technology solutions definitely require value chain based support, and there are solutions, and we are making progress, and we can make even more progress if we focus on more of a value chain based approach. Thank you for your time.
Claire, thank you for building on Martin's presentation and providing a lot of important detail. Now I'm delighted to welcome our third main presenter, Weldon Williams. Weldon is Vice President of Standards at TMS. TMS is a subsidiary of Havi, a global company focused on the supply chains of some of the world's leading brands, offering services in supply chain management and food service packaging, products, and logistics. The Weldon is responsible for standardizing the ways of working across the supply chain, leveraging his 30+ years of experience in manufacturing and a degree in biomedical engineering. Welcome, Weldon, over to you.
And if I can quit messing up the technology, I'll do that. So first of all, good afternoon, good morning to everyone. My name is Weldon Williams, been with the Havi TMS Corporation now for almost 10 years. And real quickly, what I want to do is tell you a little bit about who TMS is, because that will paint a little bit of a better picture as to why we're speaking, or I'm introducing and talking about this subject. Talk a little bit about the PFAS problem that we're seeing in packaging, and then share with you the holistic approach that we're taking to try to resolve or mitigate some of those challenges, some of the things that Claire just shared with us. So first of all, who is TMS? TMS is a technology, marketing, and sourcing organization, hence TMS. We're part of the Havi Corporation. And really what the focus of our organization is to bring about and drive some change and transformational change for the world's leading brands. Some of the organizations that we have the privilege of servicing are from a marketing standpoint as well as a sourcing standpoint are companies like Coca-Cola, Itsu, Starbucks, and the company that I work most closely with, and that is McDonald's. Really, when you look at what we have from a solution standpoint, we do everything from category management to really helping to do brand identity work, as well as doing things such as helping McDonald's set their strategy as it pertains to how to handle some of the emerging issues that we're seeing on the landscape. And so when we talk about perfluorinated chemistries and what problems that they present in packaging, really, there are three things that jump to my mind, and forgive me for my alliteration. First and foremost, and Claire spoke a lot to it, how prevalent they are, and you've heard a lot about that. They're everywhere. Whether it's on clothing, whether it's on our furniture, rugs. We're even seeing it in fire prevention industry. They're all over the place, and because they're everywhere, they're pervasive in the environment. It doesn't have to be any longer intentionally added, and I appreciated what Claire said as it pertained to we need to get away from intentionally added substances or non-intentionally added substances because of how they have been used over so many years. They are actually everywhere now. And the reason why they're everywhere is because they perform. The line that I use with people all the time, they say, why do you use plastics, or why do you use fluorinated chemistries? Because they work. They get done what we want to have done as it pertains to protecting and containing the goods that you we're conveying to our consumers. If you think about it, with all due respect, and I love the suggestions that Claire had laid out as it pertains to some things that you can do to make products less grease transferable. But when I think about my bacon, I like the grease on my bacon, and because of it, and because of the absorbent nature of fiber, it's going to absorb it. I can't use plastic from an environmental standpoint and a cost standpoint. So we really need to find a solution that can actually allow for the very things that consumers love about the food, but at the same time, mitigate the things that the consumers dislike about it. And so when I think about perfluorinated chemistry, the legislation is all over the place. And I've put together this little heat map. So every country is leaning in to identify ways in which perfluorinated chemistries can be managed. The most extreme being in Denmark, where they say you can't have anything in there that exceeds 20 parts per million. And so as a result, it's a subject matter that every brand needs to take into consideration. And when Carl gets up and speaks a little bit about how their brand is doing it, it's incumbent upon us as a brand manager, if you will, to figure out how we can get ahead of the legislation to ensure that from a cost standpoint, implementing solutions don't negatively impact the bottom line. Because if brands aren't profitable, then invariably it has a rippling effect, not only for those organizations that support them, but also the communities that they service. So what does all this mean? From a overall standpoint, it means that we have to give extensive attention to fluorinated chemistries, and because it's not going to go away. We're going to continue to hear more and more about it. It's going to be the hot button topic. But beyond that, manufacturers need to strategize on what are ways in which they can phase these out in a cost-effective manner, and at the same time, identify alternatives that are themselves not going to be identified as being a problem. I'm thinking specifically of BPA moving to BPS, and now all of a sudden everybody doesn't like BPS either. And so now you have regrettable alternatives, right? It's going to require testing protocols to ensure that you're following suit with exactly what you're attempting to do. But the final thing, which we haven't done a whole lot of speaking on, but is going to be a real issue because they're prevalent in the environment. When you look at recycled materials, you're gonna see them also there too. So how do you deal with those? So you've heard this quote, and the whole whack-a-mole, everybody talks about it, It is true. It's a challenge. So as an organization, we've decided we needed to take a holistic approach to this. We started dealing with fluorinated chemistries back in 2016. We started to see that there was some interest in them in the part of various environmental and non-governmental organizations. And when we think about packaging, there's three things that we have to keep in mind as it pertains to the consumer. The first one is that the consumer does not want the packaging to impact the taste of the food. And so therefore we have to be very conscious of what we're putting on it. They also, because of the heightened awareness pertaining to the science behind stuff, they don't want any unnecessary chemicals on it, nor that they want it to negatively impact their environment. And so our organization has taken what I'm calling a three-pronged approach to addressing this. The first area is focusing on compliance and safety. Second one, design assurance, i.e. how we design the packages up front. And the third one being how we deal with emerging issues, or how do we stay ahead of the legislation. As it pertains to compliance and safety, there's three programs that we've put in place. The first one being our product stewardship program, where what we've done is that we make it our business to know what's in and on every package. We find this to be critical to ensure that as things are starting to emerge and evolve, that we can actually take in consideration not just what we have in the packaging, but even how those packages are going to actually interface and interact with the food products or the environment in and of itself. After we've gotten that information, we sit down and we do a full risk assessment on the package, trying to understand and determine from a life cycle management standpoint, what's going to be the impact of that package in the hands of the operators who are distributing it to the consumers, the hands of the consumers, to the garbage or recycling bins where they find themselves in. And then finally, we sit down and we do full regulatory reviews, looking at the products that we have currently in the marketplace, the products that we're bringing to the marketplace in respects to what does the regulations currently look like to ensure that, I'm not introducing fluorinated chemistries in California where it's being banned, okay? The second thing that we focus on is design assurance. It does me no good to have packages that if I haven't designed into early on the packages of things to ensure that they have a long life. In that respect, we look at the raw materials and the substances that are in there, and we do a full review of those. We talked about the product stewardship aspect, where we're sitting there and looking what's in and on it. From a raw materials standpoint, whether it's recycled materials or whether it's virgin materials, we're doing full reviews of those materials to make sure that we're designing packaging that will not only be sustainable, but also will be environmentally friendly, as well as meets a need from a fit, form, and function standpoint. We manage the materials, both the ones that we're designing in, but also at the supplier level, to make sure that our suppliers understand what materials are acceptable and which ones are not. As we start to move away from fluorinated chemistries, we have to identify what are those materials that are going to work the way we need them to, and partner with suppliers so that we can design the best materials necessary to deliver the goods and services that we've been contracted to deliver. And then the final thing, and which goes without testing, we have to test the product just to make sure that it meets our requirements from a fit, form, and function standpoint. Now, the final thing that we're doing, and which I believe is the most strategic, is that we have what we call the Emerging Issues Management Program. The program, we call it AIM, and AIM stands for Anticipatory Issues Management. And basically what it is it provides a vehicle for us to monitor legislation, as well as monitor activity of NGOs and various other folks who are influencing the pending legislation. We collaborate with industry as well as suppliers, subject matter experts. And then based on all that information, we sit down and we strategically align what should be our strategy as it pertains to packaging, not just today, that being reactive, but becoming more proactive to get ahead of some of these things to ensure that at the end of the day, we're doing what's necessary to protect the brands that we're representing, but at the same time protect the consumers and the consumers' interest. The perfect example of this, again, when we talk about perfluorinated chemistries, we identified the issue back in 2017 that it was an emerging issue that we needed to deal with. And so from a strategy standpoint, we started to move forward to initiate changes in packaging materials that we knew would be pending based upon the legislation. As a result of that work, we were able to eliminate the use of perfluorinated chemistries in those legislation, in those areas that are currently being legislated, first starting throughout Europe and now making our way in the US and globally. And we were able to do so, and the key is able to do so without a significant increase in the cost of goods. Because at the end of the day, when you're talking about packaging, packaging is, in my mind, it's a penny business. You know, unlike the adult beverage industry where the margins are high and the packaging, the margins are low. And so therefore, you need time to be able to figure out what are the best solutions to try to mitigate the challenges. And so in closing, you know, what is the way forward? There's really two keys that I think that an organization needs to have. The first thing, they have to be vigilant. They have to stay on point. They have to watch the emerging issues. They have to collaborate with cross-functionally with different organizations, with different supply chains to try to understand how they're doing things. And then they need to be agile. You need to be able to change on a whim. Because if you're not able to change rapidly, then what ends up happening is that you find yourself being overcome by the challenges that the marketplace is about to offer. And so with that, that's all I have to say. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, and thank you. What a comprehensive approach to tackling a tough problem, and one that you were on top of, 6+ years ago. To our intrepid audience, we have some good questions coming through. Please avail yourself of the Q&A for our presenters. And now to bridge to that Q&A, I'm happy to welcome Carl Botha. Carl's been listening attentively to the presentations and is just going to offer us a brief bridge between the presentations and our Q&A through the lens of the Tim Hortons experience. Carl is Senior Manager of Sustainability and Packaging at Tim Hortons. Carl leads packaging innovations at Tim Hortons Canada and is responsible for the planet pillar of the Tim's for Good framework. That framework includes initiatives like reusable and returnable packaging, landfill diversion, and food waste diversion. And Carl, like Martin and Claire, is also a member of our PAC Next Leadership Council. So Carl, we welcome your thoughts. Lindsay, do you see Carl? We may have.
He just dropped off.
May have a technical issue. So what we're going to do is, while Carl presumably just gets sorted in terms of the Zoom link, I'm going to, just as I say that, Carl is reconnecting. So before I jump into a question, hey, Carl, good to see you.
Good to see you. Sorry, we've got a couple hundred people visiting the office today, so I think internet's a little spotty.
Yes, so you've been introduced, and so if over to you, we'd love to hear your thoughts, kind of bridging from Martin, Claire, and Weldon, and hearing a bit about the Tim Hortons experience in this area.
Absolutely. I know we're a little over time, so I'll keep my sort of bridge short here.
Yeah.
I think, building on Martin's presentation, I think this is exactly the reason why at Tim Hortons we don't refer to suppliers. We refer to the folks that we work with as partners. And for us, a key test of knowing whether we've developed that collaborative relationship is when you call your partner and their phone's ringing and they look to see who's calling, what's that first feeling they have? And are they stopping what they're doing to pick up the phone? having those types of collaborative relationships has allowed us to address not just PFAS at Tim's, but packaging. There's a lot of hot topics, a lot of things are changing. So it's more important than ever to have those types of collaborative relationships, and really key takeaway there. Maybe on Claire and Weldon's presentation, the one piece that I'll add on and encourage brand owners on the call to consider is reevaluating guest expectations around packaging. So, to Weldon's point, we had PFAS because there was a functional reason in paper packaging, for example, on having a grease barrier. And I also love bacon, and I love a good breakfast sandwich, and of course there's grease with that, and especially things like hash browns and fries. I guess we've done a lot of research at Tim's and would encourage others to do research around how important is matching that same grease barrier. So a lot of the technology solutions that Claire had mentioned do come at a premium or a cost to brands, but actually, if you understand your guest preferences deeper, you may come to realize that a lower grease barrier could be acceptable. Maybe a lower basis weight of paper could be acceptable. For the example of fries, maybe going from a paperboard product to a specialty paper and saving on paper weight, but also finding something that covers some of the costs of going to a technology solution that can get you a better grease barrier, but without fluorinated chemicals. So there's ways that we can solve this issue, especially when it comes to the cost impact, which is more important than ever. By just being a bit more creative on how we research and sort of baseline guest expectations. It doesn't have to match the packaging you have today. It just has to meet guest expectations, which we feel have shifted over the past years to make sure that packaging is more sustainable, still functional, but maybe that baseline of functionality is different than what it used to be. So I'll maybe leave my bridge there, and Andrew, happy to answer any questions that come through.
Yeah, thanks so much. And I think an excellent bridge to some very good questions that are coming up from our audience. So I'd invite our presenters to join me on camera. So audience, we are your moderated panel. We've got 10 plus minutes to field your questions. And so I'm gonna get the ball rolling here, and some of these questions I'll ask our presenters, a couple of you to chime in on. Claire, I'll start with you. I'll put you on the hot seat here. And so we got a question coming through, and it's this: it's what is the level of concern for packaging of non-food, or for example, personal hygiene products? Manufactured goods, poly bags, etc. Is the main issue the transfer to the food, or is there more to it than that? So again, Claire, if I could start with you on this good question.
Yeah, I think it is a good question. And I think it alludes to, when Martin was talking about the environment in the UK and water and things like that. But and I would take a step back and think about what we're trying to do in packaging in terms of sustainability. And so if we want recyclability and we want packaging to be able to be reused and things like that, then we need to be able to control our chemicals of concern. So we could have a skincare outer package, secondary package, not in direct contact with the, let's say, lotion, but then that might be used for, it might go through a recycling mill and then be used for direct food contact. So we do have regulations, which is awesome. And we do have approval bodies. For example, there's one at Western Michigan University where they assess whether the packaging has chemicals of concern or PFAS. So it's certified as recyclable. And the issue is we don't have a very tight chain of custody in plastics, but also in paper. And so, yes, it is important. And so what we're hearing from legislation is it's not just for food packaging, it's for packaging in general. So hope that answers the question.
Yeah, Claire, I think it does. Joel, I hope that helps. And again, as advertised at the top of the webinar, please feel free to follow up with, it could be via me or directly with any of the presenters after the webinar if you have those follow-up questions from any of these responses. So thanks, Claire. I'll go to Weldon with maybe call it the $1 million question, but here it is. How can we manage materials and understand what is in our packaging components when there are, as I believe it was Martin, but it was certainly flagged that there are 9,000 odd PFAS chemicals to keep track of. So lots of them out there. I think Claire said, focusing on 660 alone in inks. So Weldon, any, broad thinking on how do we do that when it's a big problem?
You can't keep track of them all. And the reality of it is there's more that are being created. What needs to happen and what we've done, I can just speak to what we've done, is because the leading way of detecting whether or not you have fluorinated chemistries in your, and I put quotes on there because for various reasons, is by doing a total fluorine test. And so what we've done is that we've moved out of fluorinated chemistries, period. By doing that, you're going to get, because you have residual fluorinated product in the environment, you'll get ppm levels of less than typically 20, and but definitely you'll have it less than 100. And the running thought these days right now is that if you're less than 100 parts per million, then you're probably not intentionally adding it. And typically the people who are putting pressure on you, whether it's government or NGOs, will typically back off of you. And so we've eliminated the intentionally adding it, and we've eliminated the use of fluorinated chemistries altogether.
Well, then, thank you. And Carl, something Weldon just said surfaced something for me. I know you've thought about the total fluorine test, which Weldon just mentioned in your business, and just wondering if you could build on what Weldon just said with any adds with regards to that particular type of testing, even questions you have around it.
Yeah, I think total fluorine is definitely the cheapest and fastest way to identify whether you may have a problem. An elevated fluorine level, like, Weldon mentioned, like 20 parts per million, doesn't necessarily mean that you're intentionally adding something. We've even found packaging that had intentionally added fluorinated chemistry, testing at 50, 60 parts per million. So 100 isn't perfect either. Fluorine's also one of the most common elements. Like, you'll find it everywhere. Depending on where you buy your paper, you'll get higher ppm levels on that test. So we don't look at that test as a pass or fail at Tim's. What we've done is we said anything below 20 parts per million, generally very low concern, attached with a letter that guarantees that we're not intentionally adding any fluorinated chemistry. Depending on whether there's recycled content or not, we'll have a different sliding scale for whether we need to do more research and more testing to understand if it's not being intentionally added, is there another source for fluorinated chemistry in our packaging? So, I think not focusing on individual types of PFAS, the list of 9,000 chemicals. When I first started this work, people were saying 6,000. So I guess it's up 50% now. But yeah, just generally using total fluorine as a cheap and fast way to test, and knowing where you need to look further. But for example, like in recycled content, you'll find higher levels of fluorine, likely because of contamination in the recycling stream. So even though it's not intentionally added, and you don't know exactly what fluorinated chemistry is landing in your packaging, you know that it's there because you're getting higher ppm levels than for virgin paper. So hopefully that adds a bit of value.
Yeah, very helpful, Carl. That's you were reading my mind on. I knew you had this insight, so thank you for that. Claire, I'd like to come back to you. And so a really good question here. There's a lot to it. So even if you take a peek at the Q&A toward the bottom of the stack there, but the question is this. So where regulations say non-intentionally added PFAS and sort of non-detectable in quotes, how do you think the packaging industry will manage low residual levels of fluorine, like, for example, from wood pulp or water? We heard Martin talking about its presence in drinking water, etc. So any
yeah, I guess I have two answers. One, I'll build on what Carl and Weldon were just saying, is we need to come up with a level, right? I believe there's a state out on the East Coast of the US and they're, no tolerance, right? But we have it inherently, as we've all talked about, it's in our world, right? And so there's also legislation where it says, only, one carbon fluorine bonded to one carbon bond, is being regulated, and all these mishmash of regulations and non-intentionally added and intentionally added. The bottom line for human health and environmental health is we need to have a better understanding of what that level is, right? So we just talked about 20 parts per million, 100 parts per million is not intentionally added, things like that. But if we're really trying to do something that's safe for humans and the environment, we need to know what that level is. Is it 100 ppm? I don't know. So we've got a whole lot of really smart toxicologists working on this. So we need to establish what that level is and have some consistency. Boy, I can't even imagine what it's like to be a packaging supplier now because you're global, right? Most packaging companies are global and you're dealing with all these global regulations. And so the big players in the food industry, which I know pretty well, are going with the toughest regulation, because that's the safest. They're a global food company. If they ship product over to Europe and to Kansas, they need to make sure it's compliant with both. And so I do think the 100 ppm thing is kind of taking off. And I do think it's becoming irrelevant whether it's non-intentionally added and intentionally added, because we're seeing kind of a marriage, if you will, between what we want in the environment and can handle in the environment and what's harmful to humans, both in terms of migration and things like that. One thing I did want to point out, which I think has not been part of the discussion yet, is we've talked a lot about direct contact with recycled packaging. And so that is actually regulated. That's not allowed in certain instances with certain foods. So we don't allow recycled content paperboard in contact with certain foods anyway. And so that does allow a certain degree of protection from these non-intentionally, potentially very high recycled streams.
Claire, thank you. And I think in doing that, I hope that responds to a good question from Alan. So covering off a few other questions that came up in the meantime here. I'm going to go to Weldon. Weldon, you mentioned in your introduction, you work often with big companies like McDonald's. And the question here is, and in particular, given that, PAC Global has a number of small businesses, small and medium-sized enterprises as its members, part of its membership. So is the kind of systems approach that Martin outlined and that you added further articulation to, is this limited to the big players, or is this accessible to the SMEs, the small and medium-sized enterprises out there?
The answer to the question is yes, it is. The challenge, obviously, the challenge with any type of collaboration is ensuring that trade secrets or anything illegal corroboration can be that there's no view of that. But we have had several customers that we've had in the past who have pulled together those kinds. And really the key is laying out the ground rules when you bring these people together. Even the small suppliers have suppliers that they're engaged with, and typically their supply chain is more diverse than just one or two isolated suppliers. So the key is bringing them together, laying the ground rules out. What are you really discussing? Making sure that it's really not about competition, but it's about collaboration, and then just engaging in that. We always welcome folks if they to participate in those conversations with us, because at the end of the day, we're not talking about things that give you a competitive advantage, i.e., how do I reduce the cost of goods? What we're talking about is how do we ensure from a supply chain standpoint that we're resolving challenges. We do things like that with FSAP, the Food Safety Alliance for Packaging. It's part of IOPP, where we bring people together to have conversations about these things. And I think the more conversations we have in this space, and including the NGOs in those discussions, I think the better off that we become, because now everybody's moving towards a common goal versus feeling as if we're always competing. I hope I answered your question.
You did, and yeah, I think it was well answered. And even though we have a few more questions that we would love to field, I think, Weldon, that was kind of a perfect way to end it, because you talked about we need these conversations to happen. So we hope to our audience that today was one of those conversations that helped you with your decision making going forward. I'd like to thank very much our presenters, Martin, Claire, Weldon, and Carl. We appreciate you taking time out of busy schedules to be with us today, to be with PAC Global and our community. So with that said, we wish you all the best for the rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you again soon for one of our PAC Next activities. So thanks again, and see you soon.